Leeboy on the track.
The 2010 to 2014 Miami Heat may be one of the most polarizing sports teams ever. In our two-part video series, we are setting out to give you a brief history of the infamous Miami Heat dynasty. The highs, the lows, and all the relevant details in between. The Heatles came to be during the summer of 2010 when two of the NBA's premier talents, LeBron James and Chris Bosh, opted to leave their respective teams and join up with buddy Dwayne Wade in Miami. The fact that they were three NBA All-Stars teaming up to play wasn't necessarily what made them so polarizing. The Celtics had after all formed their big three just a few summers earlier. What made the team so polarizing and immediately drew the line in the sand is the way they came together. And while Bosh made his announcement to join the Heat via a standard ESPN interview,
I'm joining Mr. Wade in Miami.
LeBron James opted for an hour-long primetime TV special dubbed The Decision for his.
It's very tough. And this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach.
Following LeBron's primetime announcement, the Miami Heat opted to host a giant welcoming party in AA Arena for the Big Three a few days later. During the party, LeBron went on to make this now infamous statement. You either loved everything about the Miami Heat's newly founded Big Three, or you despised everything they stood for.
I hope he never wins anything in Miami. He is dead to me.
There was no middle ground. As summer turned to fall, the Heatles were thrust into action, and it was now time to see if all the talk and hype could be backed up. While the Heat's opening night game drew the most viewers for an NBA regular season game in cable history,
LeBron James with his first
the Heat lost at the hands of the Boston Celtics and got off to a rocky start the first season, posting a 9-8 record through their first 17 games. Following a late November loss to the Mavs, the Heat held a players-only meeting in an attempt to get their season under control.
It was a well-needed team meeting where everybody got an opportunity to get off what they had on their chest or what they had in their head about us figuring things out.
The meeting was a seeming success, seeing as the Heat went on a 12-game winning streak following it. Within this winning streak, LeBron returned to Cleveland in what was one of the most hostile environments in NBA history.
There's extensive security here, but you don't want to see some wacko.
That game alone deserves its own video. One thing that was clear following that game, though, is the Heat and LeBron James were villains in the eyes of every other team in the league. The rest of the Heat regular season trended both up and down, with the Heat posting a 58-24 record, good enough for second in the East behind league MVP Derrick Rose and his Chicago Bulls. The Heat got off to a quick start during the 2011 postseason, blowing through the 76ers in 5 games. The first round victory set up a match with the reigning kings of the East, the Boston Celtics. It's worth noting that LeBron had an ongoing rivalry with Celtics Big Three, seeing as they had eliminated him from the postseason 2 out of the past 3 years. While the Heat ultimately won this series in 5, this series was a competitive one highlighted by an OT thriller in Game 4 and a come-from-behind series clincher in Game 5 led by LeBron's clutch shooting. Their series win over Boston secured them a spot in the Eastern Conference Finals and a showdown with the top-seeded Chicago Bulls. Things got off to a slow start, with Miami dropping the first game by 21. The Heat would recover, however, by rattling off 3 straight wins and then finishing the series in Game 5 with a historic comeback. Down 12 with 3:15 to go, Miami went on an 18-3 run and secured their spot in the 2011 NBA Finals. The Heat headed into the 2011 Finals the heavy favorites against the Dallas Mavericks. Following a Game 1 victory, Miami looked solid in Game 2, holding a 15-point lead with 6.5 minutes to play before suffering a complete collapse and allowing the Mavs to mount one of the biggest late-game comebacks in NBA Finals history, capped by a Dirk Nowitzki game winner over Chris Bosh. Following the Game 2 collapse, the Heat recovered and were able to steal Game 3 on Dallas's home court. Miami was looking to deliver a potential knockout blow in Game 4, which would have put them up 3-1, with 2 of the possible 3 finals games set to be played in Miami. In a game that could have been a legacy-defining moment in LeBron's career, he crumbled under the pressure, delivering one of the worst performances of his NBA career.
This was the equivalent to me of an NBA panic attack.
In nearly 45 minutes of play, he scored just 8 points on 3 of 11 shooting and posted 4 turnovers in a Game 4 loss. The media onslaught was on after LeBron's dismissal performance, and the Heat never recovered, dropping the last 2 games and ultimately losing the finals 4-2.
The Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions.
Many sports fans rejoice in the Heat's failure.
He deserves what he's getting tonight, another loss, and I hope he has many losses to come.
And while criticism was dished out widely to everyone in the organization, no one took the brunt of it more than LeBron James. After averaging just 3 points in the fourth quarter of the NBA Finals, the backlash he faced from the media and fans was nothing short of brutal.
And earlier today, Ohio Governor John Kasich issued a declaration naming the entire Mavericks organization and their fans honorary Ohioan. It's certainly not so subtle dig at LeBron James.
These guys go on stage and talk about they're going to win not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6 championships. No, we're sitting at home like, oh, you think it's that easy, huh? Now, look where you're at right now.
Following the 2011 finals loss, LeBron stated he had lost his love for the game of basketball. In an attempt to embrace his role as villain of the league, he was often playing angry, and he just wasn't as effective with this mindset. During the lockout-lengthened offseason, LeBron both honed in on his mental game by practicing meditation and improved his physical game by teaming up with Hakeem Olajuwon to improve his post-up game. During the 2011 offseason, the Heat would draft rookie Norris Cole and sign veteran free agent Shane Battier and look to turn the page on a disappointing first season together. Christmas 2011 served as an opening day for the lockout-shortened 2011-12 NBA season. After watching the Mavs collect their finals rings from the previous year, the Heat proceeded to beat them on their home court, setting the tone for a new and improved team and mindset. Unlike the previous season's slow start, the Heat got off to a quick start in year 2, racing out to a 19-6 mark, the best in Heat franchise history. LeBron would also find his groove again, winning the 3rd MVP award of his career, as the Heat finished 2nd in the East, once again behind the Chicago Bulls.
Leans in and hits. Wade with 0.1 second left.
The Heat's 2012 postseason run began with a showdown against the New York Knicks. In what was a physical opening round series, the Heat prevailed, winning in 5 games. The Heat would go on to face an up-and-coming Pacers team in the Eastern Conference semifinals, who would end up giving them far more than expected. Early in Game 1, Chris Bosh would go down with an injury that would hold him out the rest of the series.
Gives it home and draws a foul. And Bosh still on one knee.
With the Heat down a star, they still managed to pull out Game 1. Game 2 was a different story, however, as Indiana wasted no time in stealing a game on Miami's home court. The Heat would then see similar fate in Game 3, losing by nearly 20 and giving the Pacers a 2-1 advantage in the series, with the crucial Game 4 to be played in Indiana. The stakes were incredibly high going into Game 4, with the possibility of a 3-1 hole staring the Heat down.
Well, yeah, we want to make it a 3-game series, with us regaining home court, so we look forward to the challenge.
Few members of the media failed to point out the last time LeBron had found himself in such a pressure-filled situation, he had folded. This year was different though, and LeBron's mental work through the offseason paid off big time, as he responded in the must-win Game 4 with a 40-18-9 stat line and a Heat win. LeBron was assisted by a huge performance from Dwayne Wade, who finished with 30 points. Miami would go on to win big in Game 5 at home, and clinch the series in Indiana when they won Game 6 on the heels of a 41-point outing from Dwayne Wade. With Bosh still on the sidelines injured, the Heat turned their focus to an eagerly waiting Boston Celtics team in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Heat got off to a quick start defending home court before dropping both games in Boston, setting up a pivotal Game 5 in Miami. Game 5 would see Chris Bosh return to action after having missed the previous 9 playoff games due to injury. The Celtics would steal the headlines that night though, stealing Game 5 in Miami, setting up a closeout game back in Boston, up 3-2 in the series. Game 6 of the 2012 Eastern Conference Finals is, in our opinion, the single biggest game of the Heatles' 4-season run. Everything was on the line that night in Boston. A series loss, and the Heatles became the laughingstock of the sports world, and they would have more than likely been forced to make serious changes that offseason. If that pressure wasn't enough, Game 6 also served as the biggest moment in LeBron James' career up to that point. Sure, he had played great in big moments in the previous series against Indiana, but that was the Pacers. This was different. This was the Eastern Conference Finals. This was a game against his biggest rivals on their home court. Could he really deliver on the biggest stage? LeBron's career literally stood on trial that night in Boston. Sporting his now vintage scowl, LeBron put on one of the greatest performances in NBA history that night given the stakes. He shredded the Celtics for 30 points in the first half on 12 of 14 shooting.
He did whatever he wanted to do to whomever Doc Rivers put in front of him as his sacrificial lamb. He was completely dominant. And he did it with ease. He barely broke a sweat. It was almost scary to watch, to be quite honest with you.
The Heat would jump on LeBron's back and closed out the must-win Game 6, before heading back to Miami, where they finished the Celtics off in 7, setting up their second straight trip to the finals. Looking for redemption following the previous season's finals collapse, the Heat matched up against the up-and-coming OKC Thunder. The Thunder boasted a younger, yet highly talented big three of their own, led by Kevin Durant and assisted by Russell Westbrook and James Harden. With the Thunder holding home court advantage, Games 1 and 2 of the 2012 NBA Finals kicked off in very loud and hostile Chesapeake Bay Arena. While the Heat got off to a quick start in Game 1, the Thunder came roaring back late and protected home court, taking a 1-0 series lead. The Big Three plus Shane Battier would come up huge in a back-and-forth Game 2, combining for 89 of the Heat's 100 total points. The Heat would defeat the Thunder, handing them their first home court loss of the postseason, and evening things out at 1-1 with the next 3 games tipping off in Miami. Back in Miami, the Heat played with complete confidence, slowly closing the young Thunder out. The Heat would put up a flurry of points in the Game 5 closeout, headlined by Mike Miller's 7 3-pointers. When the final buzzer sounded on June 21, 2012, the Heatles were officially crowned world champions. The Heat had avenged the previous season's embarrassment, and LeBron had gotten the monkey off his back, winning his first NBA championship and securing his first NBA Finals MVP behind some historically clutch performances. While the Heat rejoice having won their first NBA championship, their saga was only halfway told, with some of their biggest and most epic battles yet to come. Check out part 2 of our series on the Heatles to see how the rest of their run played out.